Good morning, I guess, in India. It's good evening here in California and Mexico. Pleasure to be here. And I'd like to salute President Raghunathan, Chairman Saxena, Director General Sethi, and Director Agrawal. And of course, all of the followers of AIMA and other participants in this conference. Congratulations on putting together such an auspicious effort. I will try to expand, reaffirm, in many cases, some of the thoughts that were already shared with you. I think as I begin, by the way, there's a PowerPoint, but I will not I will not show the PowerPoint. It will only distract you, but there will be a PowerPoint available for all of you, just as from the organizers. But I think in starting, what's very important is that there are still many who think that we're talking about a storm, and we're not. We're talking more about climate change. We're talking about something that will have an impact fundamentally in the landscape of higher education. And the message is that we better pay attention and we better analyze, depending on who our institution is, to try to see what it is that we need to incorporate into our respective setting. So I think that just for starters, IUP is an organization that was founded in the UK in 1965. It has tried to serve as a forum for the conversation, identification, discussion of key themes pertaining to leadership. The previous presidency was in Georgia, the previous one was in Japan, previous one was in the USA, previous one was in Chile, previous one was in Thailand, previous one was in Australia. So it's been around the world. But in any case, I will focus my remarks in particular on three different data sets. One is the IUP survey that was conducted pertaining to the pandemic and then a triennial conference held last year. Second is that there's a survey just put out by Inside Higher Education that involves, the first one involves presidents, the second one involves presidents, and then there's a third one that involves some presidents, and this was just released about a year ago, the International Association of Universities based in Paris. And I'll pick and draw from that to convey with you some key aspects. I think as we're all still trying to make some sense of how to continue serving our students as the pandemic is grappling and causing struggles everywhere in our respective societies, it is through events such as these, such as the IMA conference today, that leaders can learn from what is working, take note of what has failed, improve on what makes sense to do so, and seek to reinvent and innovate that which we must as we explore extending the boundaries of what we know. We need to become better, of higher quality, responsive, relevant, resilient, more innovative, and inclusive as we seek to achieve student success and greater welfare and well-being in our societies. Society and higher education tend to go in cycles, but there are some recurrent themes. The pandemic has intensified some themes and provided further challenges on others that we were not acting on. It has forced us to review everything we were doing and to try to recover in whatever way we can, but to be careful enough not to go back to everything as it was. That's our challenge. What needs to be transformed? There is no single yardstick or measure through which we can gauge progress and lead progress. Just like the pandemic manifested itself throughout the world, first in one place, then in another all of a sudden, so we will see different speeds and stages of recovery and development. The Association of Governing Boards states that relative to the pandemic, and as we reflect on the governance of colleges and universities, three stages, depending on where you are. Number one, there are many countries still operating on emergency mode. They have had to shift. They have not been able to go beyond that. Two, there are clearly others that are in a transition stage. And then there are very few that are already moving to transformation. There are others who have managed to move forward and cope with it in a reasonable degree. And there are others who have said already, I have not only seen light at the end of the tunnel, I am already working on the transformational change. Eventually, we all need to be in the transformational stage, but we will try to put into perspective what we have learned. First of all, we carried out a leadership survey, and we were thankful enough to receive collaboration on the part of AIU and Pankaj Pital. So it did represent not hundreds, but a few institutions from India, but also from around the world. And what we learned was the following. Most institutions were somewhat ready to face a pandemic, somewhat, not totally. They all pivoted with pedagogical, technology, and health-related measures to provide continuity to educational programs. They had to rely on the support of faculty. Regardless of how we considered the faculty were key for all of us to move in a direction that was responsive and to provide continuity. And most institutions were open and declare that they are going to be open to a more broader perspective on internationalization. We now see that people are talking more about e-mobility. People are talking more about internationalization at home. And we heard at least two of our predecessors today talk about partnerships. It is essential. You cannot do things alone, not anymore. Most institutions were impacted financially. They focus, unfortunately, still on short-term and superficial, whereas the challenge is long-term and substance, in particular, as we continue to face a VUCA world. And leaders envision a future. We ask, what do you see the next 3 to 5 years? And what they all shared, the majority, almost 2/3, they said, we see a future where those who are offering face-to-face education will continue to offer that. That's not anything different. However, we will increasingly see that they will incorporate technology, and this will be accompanied then by more hybrid and more online delivery. The writing is on the wall. It will not disappear. I think the difference is that we will see varying degrees of incorporation of hybrid and online modes of delivery. At our triennial conference, which had to be virtual because of the pandemic, it was supposed to have been in Mexico City, we were able to gather over 80 speakers. We had over 400 representatives from around the world. And so let me share with you a series of aspects that were brought to the table. As we move forward, we need to pay attention to nimbility. Nimble and quick is what is needed. As the chairman or President Raghunathan said, nimble and quick. He didn't use the word, but that's what he meant. We need to be nimble and quick. 2, we need to exercise bifocal leadership. Bifocal means, yes, pay attention to short term, but by all means, look at the long term. 3, and this was said by Paul LeBlanc, undoubtedly one of the innovators right now in the world. We need to focus on increasingly on short, accessible, laser-focused curriculum that looks at skills and relates to workplace. Predecessors insinuated that also. 3, we need to be not only international, we need to be intercultural. In the end, we're a mixture of ethnic groups, religions, countries. We need to be intercultural as we move forward. 5, And this was put on the table by Pankaj Mittal, I think very appropriately. She talked about the need for academic bank of credit. There will be increasingly numbers of students who begin in one institution, move to another, move to yet another one before they complete their undergraduate or undergraduate equivalent education. Universities need to organize how it is that we make sense out of this, whether it is through competency-based education or other ways of assessing what students learn, so that we can help them as they move around from what has been the norm, one institution to many, so that they can have a meaningful integration of what they know, so that they can join the workplace with the appropriate recognition. We are moving to more personalized programs, more individual learning. The pandemic showed us that although we were paying some attention to mental health, it is going to be a priority. More of a priority is not only mental health, but what we do to accompany the students, so that as educational institutions, we have to think about student success. Whether student success means learning, means employability, means developing global citizens, all of that, all of the above is part of procuring student success. We cannot be too choosy, but we need to recognize that wherever we look, there are Einsteins. It is our responsibility to acknowledge and identify all that talent and try to instill the appropriate skills, learning, knowledge, experiences that these Einsteins in potential can develop into thriving minds, innovative minds. We need to have a greater connection to the community. We talk about social responsibility. Yes, the pandemic has taught us. We need to move in that direction. We, of course, also need to show empathy, solidarity, flexibility, but also identify and act on opportunity. But as we look forward and as we try to determine what it is that as an educational institution we need to do, we need to think of mission. A technological university is not the same as a research university, is not the same as a liberal arts institution, is not the same as a training institute. What is the mission of the respective educational institution? How is it that we can offer what we intend to offer with quality? How is it that we can structure what we do so that we do it with operational and financial sustainability? But this one is the US. But what's important is that it interviewed about 400 university presidents. And I'll share with you two sets of information. Number one, so that you can see, pandemic has made many of us think about negative. Not everything has resulted in negative. The survey says that most presidents are confident that they're instable over the next 5 to 10 years. If it was a storm, it's going to pass, although you need to treat that as climate change. The radical change is upcoming. About half of the presidents report that their institutions have altered employment policies to give employees more flexibility after the pandemic ends. Take note, the way we had been working is not necessarily the way that we're going to be able to work or should work in the future. Between half and 2/3 of the presidents report that their institution has the capacity to meet mental health. I just mentioned that in the global survey, very important. And then most presidents indicate that their institutions implemented beneficial changes during the pandemic and will keep some of these changes even after the pandemic ends. What are some of these things? Well, we've heard some of them already. Number one, increase online learning options. 2, additional flexibility for staff to work remotely. 3, additional investment in mental health. 4, creating more stackable certificate and other alternative to existing degrees. This last one was covered by my predecessors tonight or today. Let me move on to another survey then. This was also just released about a week ago. International Association of Universities, this is based in Paris. And although it offers a different angle, this wasn't with CEOs, this was many internationalists, many directors, a few presidents, but it's also global. So what does the study yield? It yields that because of the pandemic, there have been decreasing financial means. Some students cannot benefit from remote teaching and learning for obvious reasons. They do not have access to the technology, they do not have access to the equipment, or their basic connections don't work. So it doesn't, while it might have proven to be very positive, there are some that still have a problem. 3, research activities have been delayed. 4, the staff is overworked. 5, recruitment is slowing down, which has impacted many of the higher education systems. Just reflecting in the case of the US, it is said that there was only a 3% decrease in the almost 20 million that the system has. However, simply 3 institutions that had growth are the ones that made the decrease be only 3%. Otherwise, it would have been much higher. Those 3 institutions are Southern New Hampshire University, which grew by thousands and thousands of students. Arizona State University, you've perhaps heard of Michael Crow, another innovator. And then you probably heard of Western Governors University. These 3 institutions accounted for most of the student growth that was seen in the US, which made the overall be only minus 3%. And then the last thing is that there has been a tendency to further exacerbate pre-existing inequalities. In other words, those that had problems not only continued to have problems, they got worse in many cases. Also, this survey points out that, on the other hand, there has been enhanced transversal collaboration across institutions. Again, the partnerships. There have been extraordinary measures in place to support students in need. I think the empathy and the solidarity is evidenced by many institutions drawing from wherever they could, so that if students had some financial problems with their tuition, with their living expenses, most institutions have found a way of trying to accommodate so that students can navigate through difficult times. There has been, according to this report and the respondents, an increase in the quality of research collaboration. Maybe not a lot more, but that which occurred was of high quality. And then while everybody complains, everybody who is into the international student scene might complain that international students' enrollment suffer. On the other hand, there have been increases in domestic student enrollments. As I move to the last remarks, let me comment that as we reflect on what we're going to be looking forward in the near future, we will be moving conceptually from what we call a university to what will be a global multiversity. Back in the 60s, Clark Kerr talked about multiversity in the sense of universities having different functions, serving different constituents, but that was referring to California. Now we're referring to the world after the pandemic. So what do we mean by global multiversity? We have to face and serve multiple learners. We have to be prepared to offer multiple modes of delivery because not all learners are the same. 3, we have to be multidisciplinary. We have to engage in multiple roles. Those who are mostly research institutions are going to have to pay more attention to the teaching function and to the community and outreach function. Those who are teaching are going to have to pay more attention to the other two. So universities will be increasingly trying to face with the multiple roles, not one, all three, and maybe more. And then, of course, the global refers to local relevance and global outreach. The pandemic is inevitably lingering on, but we will be moving, as we can see, to the post-pandemic era. The recommendation, of course, is for leaders and for educational institutions, don't wait until the environment is better. It is time to begin to reflect and try to transform. Whether you happen to be, as I said before, in the emergency stage, in the transition, or whether you're ready for transformational mode. University leaders should reflect on what things were working fine despite the pandemic, what is because of the pandemic, and which things we weren't doing at all, and we must. The pandemic is forcing us to say, now it is part of the challenge of higher education. We can no longer duck the challenge of being better and improving. And just to close, Tom Friedman, New York Times, has pointed out that during the pandemic, people have communicated, collaborated, and competed in more places, in more ways, with more people, across more countries than ever before. Let's take note and learn from this. Dhanyavad.